The world froze when Michel Langley appeared live on television, eyes hollow, voice trembling, standing before the cameras in a plain, empty room. There were no flags behind him, no advisors, no polished speeches. Just a man, once a titan, now crumbling under the weight of his own words. I was wrong, he whispered, barely able to hold eye contact with the lens. I let ambition blind me, and I owe an apology to Captain Ibrahim Traoré and to the people of Burkina Faso. The confession hit the world like a lightning bolt. Millions watching from phones, laptops, and giant screens gasped, their jaws slack, trying to process what they had just heard. How did it come to this? How did the mighty Michel Langley, a man praised as a hero in Washington, a high-ranking black American general, end up humbling himself before a young African captain half his age? The apology was just the beginning. As the feed crackled and Michel's hands visibly shook, one journalist dared to shout from the crowd. "Why now, General? What changed?" Michel closed his eyes briefly, almost like he was fighting back something dark. When he opened them, he said, in a low voice that sent chills through the room, "Because they lied to me, and I lied to you." The screen went black. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The story was far from over. It was just beginning. Michel Langley hadn't always been the villain of the African world. Not long ago, he was celebrated, the first African American to lead AFRICOM, the powerful U.S. military command for Africa. He had been called a son of the soil, a symbol of success for Africans across the globe. He wore his roots like a badge of honor. At least, at first. But fame, power, and pressure can twist even the purest intentions. And Michel learned that lesson the hardest way possible. It started 3 weeks earlier, when news channels flashed with a bold headline. General Michel Langley accuses Burkina Faso's Captain Traoré of gold theft and dictatorship. The words weren't just reported. They were amplified. Blasted across CNN, BBC, every outlet from New York to Paris. Captain Traoré, Langley had declared before the U.S. Senate, is using the country's gold reserves to enrich himself and fortify an illegitimate regime. Boom. Just like that, the world's view of Traoré, once seen as a young freedom fighter battling against neocolonialism, was poisoned. At least, that's what the powerful hoped would happen. But what no one expected was the fire that came next. Michel thought he was delivering a final blow. Instead, he had just thrown a match into a powder keg. Almost instantly, social media exploded. From Brooklyn to Bamako, from Atlanta to Abidjan, Africans and their allies erupted in fury. "You've forgotten who you are, Michel. Sold your soul to the very people who oppress us. Captain Traoré is fighting for our future, and you stabbed him in the back." Within hours, hashtags like #StandWithTraoré and #LangleyBetrayedUs were trending worldwide. In Harlem cafes, conversations grew heated. In WhatsApp groups across the diaspora, voice notes flew in, angry, disappointed, heartbroken. Even elders from Michel's tiny birth village of Segal, who once prayed for his success, released a heartbreaking video. "You have shamed us, Michel. You have shamed the ancestors." The impact was brutal. Michel, once untouchable, became a pariah overnight. And somewhere across the ocean, in the beating heart of West Africa, Captain Ibrahim Traoré sat silently in the presidential palace in Ouagadougou, watching everything unfold with a quiet intensity. He said only one thing to his advisors: "Let the people judge him." But judgment would not be gentle. Michel tried to stay quiet at first. He believed, or maybe he hoped, that the storm would pass, that people would forget. They didn't. Instead, every second that Michel stayed silent, the anger grew sharper, deeper, more relentless. Finally, under crushing pressure and a crumbling conscience, Michel agreed to a live interview. No prepared notes. No fancy PR team. Just him, a camera, and the truth. And that's where the story truly takes its first terrifying turn. Because what Michel was about to reveal would shake the world far more than his original betrayal. And trust me, you haven't heard anything yet. The interview began under harsh, unflattering lights that made Michel Langley's tired face look even more haunted. The host, a sharp-eyed journalist named Lisa Grant, wasted no time. "General Langley," she said, her voice slicing through the tension, You've accused Captain Ibrahim Traore of corruption. The world demands to know, were you telling the truth, or were you pressured to lie? Michel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint hum of the cameras. Then he leaned forward, clasped his hands together tightly, and said words nobody expected to hear. I was pressured. The room practically gasped. I was given reports, Michel continued, his voice cracking under the weight of it, crafted not to reveal the truth, but to justify future actions. Actions that would make Libya look like a picnic. Lisa leaned in, her eyes wide. Future actions? Are you saying the United States is planning something against Captain Traore? Michel hesitated. You could almost see the war raging inside him, loyalty to his country versus loyalty to truth. Finally, he nodded once. The plan was simple, he said bitterly. Discredit the leader. Spread fear. Isolate him. Then, replace him. Replace him with who? Lisa pushed. Michel shook his head. A puppet. Someone who'll sign contracts with foreign companies. Let foreign troops in, drain the gold mines, in the name of stability. A cold, sickening feeling spread through everyone watching. It wasn't just Burkina Faso at risk. It was the same blueprint used 100 times before, just with a new face, a new target. And Michel had been part of it. I betrayed my own blood, he said, voice breaking. I let them use me as a weapon against my own people. There it was. The confession the world didn't know it needed, but couldn't ignore. A silence so heavy filled the room it was almost unbearable. Meanwhile, across Burkina Faso, Captain Traore sat in the presidential palace, watching. He made no move, no speech, no celebration. Just a slight narrowing of his eyes. A man who understood that apologies are only the beginning of a much bigger battle. But even as Michel's apology aired, the real danger was moving faster than anyone realized. Because while the world was busy reacting to the apology, another plan was already in motion. And this time, it wasn't just words being fired. Burkina Faso security forces uncovered a deadly coup attempt, scheduled for April 16, 2025. The goal was chillingly clear. Storm the presidential compound. Capture or assassinate Captain Ibrahim Traore. Return Burkina Faso to a state of manageable chaos. Michel Langley's televised confession had barely settled when Minister of Security, Mohamed Sanaa, held a press conference announcing the foiled plot. We have arrested soldiers, ex-military personnel, and terrorist leaders, he said grimly. This coup was not a coincidence. It was coordinated, and it had foreign ties. Foreign ties. Everyone knew what that meant, even if no names were spoken. Back in the United States, inside the cold marble halls of Washington, there was panic behind closed doors. The narrative was slipping. The people weren't buying the dictator story anymore. Instead, they were rallying harder around Traore. In the streets of Ouagadougou, something extraordinary happened that night. Thousands of citizens marched toward the presidential palace. Old men, mothers carrying babies, teenagers with homemade signs. They didn't run. They didn't hide. They surrounded Captain Traore's residence, standing shoulder to shoulder, forming a human shield made of nothing but love, loyalty, and determination. Men raised their fists. Women sang freedom songs that echoed into the night. Children painted their faces with the Burkina Faso flag. And in that moment, one thing became undeniable. Captain Ibrahim Traore wasn't just a president. He was their president. Not installed by foreign hands. Not bought by corporations. Chosen by the people. Protected by the people. And no foreign general, no secret meeting, no backroom deal was going to change that. But the empire doesn't surrender easily. Even as the people stood strong, whispers filled the air, of sanctions, of sabotage, of assassins waiting in the shadows. The storm wasn't over. In fact, it was just getting started. Hey fam, if you're still with me deep into this story, take a quick second. Smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Are you in the US, the Caribbean, Africa, Europe? We want to see how global our family is. Now, back to the story because you won't believe what's about to happen next. In the dead of night, Just hours after the news of the foiled coup shook the world, a small convoy of armored trucks sped across the dusty back roads outside Ouagadougou. Inside, Burkina Faso's elite security forces sat tense and alert, weapons ready, hearts pounding. Their mission was simple but deadly: hunt down the last remnants of the coup plotters before they could regroup. What they didn't know was that they were racing against an invisible clock. Somewhere deep within the city, foreign agents, yes, actual operatives with no allegiance to Burkina Faso, were already putting a second plan into motion. One that didn't require tanks or soldiers. Just one well-placed bullet. As the convoy moved, the captain in charge received a scrambled message through a secure line. New intel. Target spotted. Moving towards Sector 9. Immediate interception required. The convoy veered sharply, kicking up a cloud of red dust behind them. Meanwhile, inside the presidential palace, Captain Ibrahim Traore sat in his modest office, surrounded by old maps, intelligence reports, and folders worn from handling. He wasn't celebrating the coup's failure. He wasn't throwing a party. He was studying, planning, preparing. Because he knew better than anyone, survival today didn't guarantee survival tomorrow. A soft knock at the door. His chief security officer stepped inside, eyes grim. "Captain, we've received credible threats. High probability of an assassination attempt tonight." Traore didn't flinch. He simply nodded once and said, "Double the perimeter. No one in, no one out. We protect the future, at all costs." While soldiers reinforced the compound, while thousands still sang and guarded the palace from the outside, something strange happened on social media. A video began circulating, almost out of nowhere. It was grainy, clearly taken in secret. It showed a meeting, not in Burkina Faso, but in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. Men in suits, military uniforms, foreign accents. Maps of Burkina Faso spread out across a long table. Satellite images of the presidential compound. One voice, clear as day, said, "We need him out before the elections. If we wait, it'll be too late." It was undeniable. Proof that the coup wasn't just a handful of disgruntled soldiers. It was part of something much, much bigger. The video went viral in minutes. By dawn, it had been seen by millions. And suddenly, the conversation changed. No longer was it about, "Is Traoré corrupt?" It became, "Why are foreign powers so desperate to remove him?" The masks were falling. The lies were unraveling. But with every truth exposed, the danger to Captain Traoré, and to Burkina Faso itself, grew even more urgent. Thousands of miles away, in Washington, D.C., Michel Langley watched the chaos unfold from his private apartment. He had been suspended from active duty. The invitations to exclusive dinners had dried up. The phone calls stopped. He was, in every sense of the word, alone. A knock rattled his door. Michel approached cautiously, peeking through the peephole. Standing there was a young man, maybe late 20s, dark-skinned, wearing a worn army jacket with no insignias. He wasn't smiling. Without waiting for an invitation, the man spoke through the door. "You think an apology is enough?" Michel froze. "You think a few tears on television will erase what you almost destroyed?" Michel opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The man leaned in closer. "You have a choice, General. Tell the world the full truth, or watch history repeat itself, with even more blood this time." And just like that, the man turned and disappeared into the night. Michel stood there, breathing hard, realizing something he had known deep down all along. This wasn't over. Not even close. He still had a role to play, and this time, he couldn't afford to get it wrong. As Michel closed the door behind him, he didn't notice the small scrap of paper left on the ground. On it, scrawled in hurried handwriting, were just 3 chilling words. Ouagadougou or nowhere. And somewhere across the Atlantic, plans far more dangerous than coups or speeches were already being set into motion. Because this wasn't just a fight for one country anymore. It was a fight for the soul of an entire continent. And if Michel Langley wanted redemption, he would have to earn it, with truth, with action, and with blood if necessary. Because this time, silence would be betrayal. As dawn broke over Ouagadougou, the city buzzed with a nervous, electric energy. Shops opened cautiously. Soldiers patrolled the streets in heavier numbers. But the people, fearless as ever, kept gathering outside the presidential palace, like living walls made of hope. Inside the palace, Captain Ibrahim Traoré stood at a balcony window, surveying the crowd. Old women waved scarves in the air. Young men chanted his name. Children perched on their fathers' shoulders, waving tiny flags stitched by hand. They were not ordered to be here. They chose to be here. He turned to his closest advisor, a wiry man named Boubacar. "Prepare a public address," Traoré said calmly. "No scripts. No lies. They deserve to hear the truth, directly from me." Meanwhile, halfway across the Atlantic in Washington, D.C., Michel Langley stared at the note left on his doorstep. Ouagadougou or nowhere. He knew exactly what it meant. If he wanted to truly apologize, to make it right, he had to go to Burkina Faso himself, face to face. It wasn't just a matter of pride anymore. It was survival, of his soul, of his people. Against every warning from former colleagues, against every political advisor telling him to lay low, Michel booked a direct flight to Ouagadougou. And when he boarded the plane, hood up, sunglasses on, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Real fear. Not fear of death. Fear of irrelevance. Fear that history would remember him not as a warrior, but as a traitor. The journey felt endless. The wheels touching the tarmac sounded like a judge's gavel slamming down. Michel stepped onto Burkina Faso soil for the first time in decades. The heat hit him immediately, thick and honest, a sharp contrast to the sterile cold conference rooms where he'd spent most of his career. He wasn't welcomed. No flashing cameras. No applause. Only silent stares from airport guards who recognized him and didn't bother to hide their contempt. A black SUV waited for him, sent discreetly by a mutual connection who still believed Michel deserved a chance at redemption. As they drove through the city, Michel looked out the window at the posters plastered everywhere. "We stand with Traoré. Burkina Faso is not for sale. Our gold, our blood, our future." The messages were clear. The people were not confused. They had chosen their side. And unless Michel did something extraordinary, he would forever be remembered as the man who stood on the wrong side of history. The SUV pulled up to a heavily guarded government building, not the palace itself, but close enough. Michel was led inside, through metal detectors, past stone-faced soldiers, into a small room lit only by the harsh African sun slanting through dusty windows. There, waiting for him, was Boubacar. He didn't shake Michel's hand. He didn't even offer a chair. "You asked for an audience with the captain," Boubacar said, his voice clipped. "You will speak. But know this, if you are lying, if this is another trick." "It's not," Michel interrupted, voice firm but shaking slightly. "I came to make it right." Boubacar studied him a long moment, then turned on his heel. "Follow me." They walked down a long corridor filled with murals of Burkina Faso's revolutionary past. Thomas Sankara leading marches, farmers harvesting cotton, children studying under trees. Michel's footsteps echoed, hollow and heavy. Finally, they reached a grand set of double doors. Boubacar turned, fixing Michel with a look that felt almost like a final judgment. "Speak from your heart," he said simply. "Or speak not at all." The doors swung open. And there he was, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, not wearing military garb, not seated behind a grand desk, just standing there, simple clothes, arms crossed, eyes sharp enough to cut steel. Michel stepped forward, heart pounding so loud he thought the room could hear it. He dropped to one knee. A hush fell over the chamber. "I betrayed you," Michel said hoarsely. "I betrayed our ancestors. I let power and fear cloud my soul. I was wrong." He looked up, tears brimming but not falling. "And I am here to beg your forgiveness." The silence stretched endlessly. For a heartbeat, it seemed like Traoré might order his guards to drag Michel out, or worse. Instead, the young captain walked forward, his boots clicking against the marble floor. He stood directly over Michel, studying him. And then, quietly but with unmistakable authority, Traoré spoke. "Words are wind, General." Michel bowed his head lower. "But action," Traoré continued, voice steady, "action is the currency of truth." He extended his hand. Michel, stunned, grasped it with both of his own. The room seemed to exhale. But just as hope flickered in Michel's heart, an urgent commotion erupted outside the hall. Shouts, gunfire, the unmistakable roar of chaos. Boubacar burst into the room, breathless. "Captain," he shouted, "it's happening again. Another coup attempt." The walls shook as an explosion rattled the compound. Michel froze, his heart seizing with dread. Because whatever redemption he had come here seeking, it was now tied not just to words, but to whether he would stand and fight, or betray them again. Chaos tore through the air as Michel Langley stood frozen, still gripping Captain Traoré's hand. Outside, the echoes of gunfire and exploding tires rattled the ancient stone walls of the government compound. "Move!" Boubacar barked, grabbing Michel's arm and yanking him forward. Captain Traoré, calm under pressure, was already issuing orders. Lock down the inner corridors. Secure the command room. Protect the civilians first. Soldiers snapped into action, but the sounds outside grew louder, closer. Whoever was attacking wasn't wasting time. Michel found himself swept along in the tide of movement, his mind spinning. He had come to apologize. He had not come to fight. And yet, here he was, thrown into the middle of a real battle for the future of a nation. Inside the Emergency Operations Center, a giant map of Ouagadougou lit up with red dots marking the attackers' positions. "They're using the same tactics as the last coup attempt," Boubacar muttered, scanning the map. "Multiple fronts. Distractions everywhere. The real strike will come straight at us." Captain Traoré studied the screen with an intensity that made Michel's chest tighten. "They think we'll panic," Traoré said quietly. "They think we'll abandon each other." He turned, looking Michel squarely in the eye. "But not today." Michel's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about rank, salary, or medals. He was thinking about redemption. Without hesitation, Michel spoke. "What can I do?" Boubacar threw him a rifle without ceremony. "Fight." There was no grand speech. No slow-motion hero moment. Just a once powerful general, stripped of titles and privilege, standing side by side with the people he had once betrayed. Outside, the first wave of attackers reached the perimeter walls. The ground shook with the force of their explosives. But something was different this time. As the smoke cleared, it wasn't just soldiers standing there. It was the people. Farmers with old hunting rifles. Mothers wielding iron cooking pots. Teenagers clutching sticks and stones. The same people who had sung for Traoré just nights ago were now ready to fight for him with their bare hands if necessary. Michel watched in awe as the crowd surged forward, not retreating, but charging. Defending. Living proof of the bond Traoré had forged, not with promises, but with action. The battle raged through the night. Small arms fire cracked through the dark. Sirens screamed. Shouts in multiple languages echoed across the compound. But the defenders, fueled by something stronger than fear, refused to give an inch. And slowly, surely, they pushed the attackers back. By sunrise, it was over. Bodies lay scattered on the cracked streets. Weapons abandoned. Vehicles smoldered in the rising heat. But the people, and their leader, stood tall. Inside the battered command center, Michel slumped against a wall, exhausted, bloodied, but alive. Captain Traoré walked over, offering him a simple nod of respect. "You stayed," Traoré said quietly. Michel looked up, feeling an emotion he hadn't felt since his youth: pride. "I had to," he whispered. Because somewhere between the lies he had told and the truths he had hidden, Michel Langley had found himself again. Not as a general, not as a pawn, but as a man who chose his people when it mattered most. The following week, Traoré made a rare public appearance alongside Michel. Thousands gathered at Revolution Square, the heart of Ouagadougou. Standing on a simple platform, Traoré addressed his people. "Today," he said, voice carrying strong over the crowd, "we honor those who stood by us. Those who chose courage over comfort. Those who, when faced with truth, chose to walk the hard road of redemption." He turned to Michel. "And today, Michel Langley stands not as an outsider, but as a brother." The crowd erupted, some in cheers, some in cautious clapping. Forgiveness wasn't easy, but it had begun. Michel stepped to the microphone, heart pounding. "I failed you once," he said, voice steady. "But today I stand with you. With Traoré. With Africa. And I promise you, never again will I be used against my own." A single chant rose from the crowd, low and powerful. "Burkina Faso! Burkina Faso! Burkina Faso!" Michel closed his eyes, letting the sound wash over him. He knew he couldn't erase the past. He couldn't undo the harm he had caused. But standing there, among a people who had suffered more betrayal than he could ever imagine, and still had the strength to forgive, Michel realized something. Redemption wasn't given. It was fought for. And he was willing to fight for it, with every breath he had left. The camera panned up to the giant Burkinabe flag fluttering against the bright African sky. A symbol not just of a nation reborn, but of a people who refused to be conquered. Of a leader who refused to be bought. And of a man who, at the very end, chose to stand on the side of truth. Thank you for staying through this powerful story. If you believe in the strength of unity, courage, and redemption, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with everyone you know. Tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were Michel Langley? Have you ever witnessed someone make a real change of heart? Let's talk about it below. Your voice matters. Until next time, stay strong, stay aware, and stay humble.